what I first wanted to ask you is to sketch a little bit the way FIBA is organized and what department you are working for and, well, essentially what is your role here?
The way FIBA is organized, we have a headquarters office in Geneva, Switzerland, and then we have confederations, just like FIFA does. But the difference in football is that these confederations usually have a different name. It's not called FIFA Europe or FIFA Asia, rather than they have the Asian Football Confederation, UEFA. But for FIBA, our confederations, or the regional offices as we call them now, is named FIBA Europe, FIBA Asia, FIBA Oceania, FIBA Americas. So we have one office for actually two continents, FIBA Americas. But so that's how it's structured. And I work at the FIBA Europe office, and I'm the competitions coordinator for Europe. And at this event, my role is I'm the competitions manager for this venue, and we are here with one more competitions manager and two events manager, one marketing person, and of course our editorial staff, along with our media manager.
What is the most important goal for your department with events like these, but also the youth events?
With such a big event like this, when there's so much media exposure, TV exposure, I think the most important point for us is that the event runs smoothly on the screen, on the scenes. We certainly don't want any controversial issues such as fan fighting or federations making a big deal out of sometimes some of the wins or losses. So this is what we're trying to avoid, and I guess everyone works towards the same goal of having everything run smoothly rather than focus on the basketball part or the competitive part of the event itself. We just want, quote unquote, no trouble throughout an event like this. But it's sometimes different for youth events because we wish these events to be more competitive. We wish that these events are more sellable, but not from a financial standpoint, but from the perspective of the fans, from the perspective of the basketball lovers. And certainly we hope that especially some of our lower divisions in youth events play a big role towards developing basketball in countries that are not perhaps as popular. I mean, in countries where basketball is not perhaps as popular of a sport as some of the other ones. So, yeah, there are certainly different things, but initially our goal is to have a fun environment for the fans, a good product to put in front of the fans as well. Not only to the fans here, but the fans there watching the event behind their TVs or following the event through different media channels. We certainly want to have a good product, and all of us, regardless of our positions at a big event like this, we're working towards that.
Can we talk a little bit further about this specific group phase in Romania? Because Romania didn't qualify or didn't have to qualify. What is the idea behind that? Because I think that's the first time in a long time that it worked that way.
Yeah, certainly. I would say this venue is probably unique in the sense that you haven't seen Romania in a long time in a Eurobasket prior to this event. But I wasn't here for the bidding process. Actually, I started much later than the bidding process, so I don't actually know how the bidding process works. I think it's really important for this venue in Cluj and the fans here and the basketball community in Romania to witness such an event happening at their hometown, because I think it will push them to become better at the sport itself. It will help them love the sport more, especially to have two teams like Croatia and Spain filled with NBA stars or basketball stars across their continent. It's very important for the fans to witness, and I'm really surprised by the attendance of the local fans also to Spanish and Croatian games, because they're aware of this fact, and I think this will also, there's a lot happening in the city towards basketball. So it's also important to mention that besides the FIBA event itself. And now the local team will play Champions League qualifiers at least, or I'm not really sure about that, but they're going to play Champions League in one format or another. And I think it's great for them to move forward and make basketball bigger in this country, and especially their win at the under 20 B division this year, which was hosted in Oradea, is also really important for them to push the sport forward. And now you can see they have young players in the team that also played the under 20 event, and I think it's quite interesting to see the difference between game day 1 and game day 4, and how much more they start feeling comfortable with the ball, with their surroundings. So I think this is already working from a basketball standpoint, and let's hope that the future is bright for this country and their basketball.
And then you have also Hungary in this group, who was chosen as a partner by Romania, which didn't look like it in the gym yesterday, but and they even survive after 46 years.
As far as I'm aware, every host had the chance of choosing a partner federation. I think this is more for the market value of the event and for people to be able to travel easily and see their own team play in the arena or in the competition. I think it was a good choice. I don't know if it panned out the way that they hoped, the Romanians, but the atmosphere yesterday was nothing short of breathtaking for me. So I presume that, with keeping in mind that there was no incidents between the fans, I think it was a very successful choice. And also not only from the Romania versus Hungary game, but all of the Hungarian games were quite fun to watch because the fans were here. They made a good atmosphere for everybody, for us, the working staff. I don't know from the media standpoint, but it certainly made it better, I would say.
The underlying goals, can you tell a little bit more about that? And maybe also how does 3-on-3 is a factor in those underlying goals?
The 3x3 is a little bit because we are actually completely separate departments, and I love 3-on-3, following 3-on-3. They made a good product, I would say. And how does that collide with the underlying goals of this event? Now that 3x3 is an Olympic sport, no matter where it's played or where 5-on-5 is played, I think there's a sort of marketing goal that collides on both sides. But as you know, this is the last Eurobasket as we kind of know it. So this is the last Eurobasket that will be hosted every other year. And from now on, it will be every 4 years. I guess for us, the main underlying goal is to leave a very, very big legacy of what has happened until today, and also pave the way for a new sport, for perhaps a new group of athletes that really don't have to choose a specific segment of a sport, but can also play something else and become professional at it. When we leave this arena on Friday to move on to the final phase, we want to look back and say, yeah, that was good. If we watch the tape again, we will have a story to tell to somebody, and hopefully we can market the story for many years from now.
Let's talk about Western Europe a little bit, Holland, and countries like Holland.
I was talking to a colleague of mine, not colleague from FIBA, but colleague from the sports world, and we were discussing how Denmark has beaten Turkey. We were talking about a country that's 80 million in Turkey, and we were talking about how for the past 3 Olympics, Denmark has finished on top of Turkey on the medal table by a mile. There are a lot of countries in between Denmark and Turkey. From a basketball standpoint, I think I know some countries issue with the distribution of the funds towards team sports nowadays.
Us.
Yeah, perhaps, and also I'm aware that Great Britain is struggling towards the distribution of funds towards basketball. With the medal count, for example, we set a benchmark that is not really good for the team sports. With 1/4 of the money that you would spend to create a great basketball team, you could probably focus on 4 or 5 individual athletes, which out of 3 can bring a medal, which will raise your rank in the Olympic medal table. And therefore, on paper, you can say that I'm more successful with 5 good athletes rather than winning just 1 medal with 12 athletes. But for me, I think it's important to look behind the scenes to to see what happens with these 12 athletes that you have in a basketball team, or with the, I don't know, 18 athletes that you have in a football team. These people are the ones that usually ignite a sport and ignite sports in communities. Because when you're talking about individual sports, on average, I believe that the cost of participating in such sports is also already very high. Until you get to the point of where you're funded to do this sport, until you've proven that you're successful enough, you also have to spend a lot of money to get to that point. But for me, I think from a sporting perspective, when you focus on a sport like basketball or volleyball or handball or football, you're talking about very small communities. You're talking about a community of 12 people that wake up, text to each other, write to each other, ask each other how they are, if they're going to come to practice that night. And this jumps to other communities. If you're a next door neighbor, where I'm from in Turkey, even as a kid, we woke up thinking that which neighborhood should we play the next day in a football game. But this is because football is the main popular sport in most of the countries, but also for me, basketball started in that way. It started as a communal feeling. And I guess this is where we have to focus on the main goal of sports. If you want more people to participate and enjoy sport and connect through sport, I think team sports are very important. And I guess the international or the national Olympic committees, etc., should look at this aspect of sports rather than focusing on medals being a value in the public eye, especially in major events. Because then, yes, it is probably correct that we can focus on 7 individual sports rather than focusing on one team sport with our funds, with our attention. But I don't know if that's the way to move forward. I think sports is all about equality in this sense, and I think funding, no matter what, should be also equally distributed across all sports. We can also do it percentage-wise. Basketball needs more money to look after 12 people, and rowing has to look after 3 people, etc. But I think if the funds are equally distributed, I think it's also less of a headache for the national federations, the national Olympic committees. And they don't have to find reasons to say, oh, we did not fund basketball because, and it would be easier for them to say, we did equally support every sport, and we understand that basketball or football, okay, football is very popular. I usually keep football out of the topic when I'm talking about sports. But basketball, volleyball, when you fund such sports, there's a wave that's coming behind that. There is a wave that follows the success, because for some countries, success does not have to be a medal. The success can be also measured in visibility of the team, of the national team, of the club teams. So once you start seeing your national teams or your club teams on TV, yeah, probably there's a 3-year-old kid that's sitting at home saying, oh, I would like to try that sport. So it's just as important. And for me, the count of medals means for nothing. It's not a criteria for success, because the count of medals never help you involve more people in sport.
But the men's struggle in Holland, and Belgium, our neighbor, part of it even the same language, they make a different choice, and all their team sports are doing well already. Belgium in this tournament is doing a little less than hoped for, I think, but all over the board, all their team sports are good, and our men are struggling if you compare it to that.
For me, one of the most interesting sports stories, as we've talked a couple of days before, I think, is the Dutch women's volleyball team. Mm-hmm. They're quite successful. You guys definitely do have a gold generation, or some sort of 4 or 5 golden players, which also help ignite the rest of the team as well. And also, it raises interest over volleyball. And I believe the Dutch are the tallest people in the world, on average.
That's yes.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but yeah. So I think...
I sometimes tell people about a story that I wrote, that in the Netherlands we have 40,000 boys and men over 2 meters. And when I told the Icelanders that, they passed out.
Yeah, so I guess it's also important to focus on the demographics for sure. I really, one of the countries that I have no knowledge about their sports system is Belgium because I think they're also struggling with the two different parts of Belgium. Yeah,
Three.
yeah, but I think also during the selection process, this division is involved in the equation somehow, especially for youth. But it was really interesting to see, especially the success they have had in women's basketball this year as well. I would say more so than men, especially at Eurobasket women. They came up blazing, and you could see that there was a sort of passion towards basketball within this delegation, and they wanted to not only reflect this passion within themselves, but they wanted to share it with everybody that they could. And yeah, at the youth tournaments that I have been at, where I had Belgium, I've seen really passionate people. And of course, this doesn't happen without some sort of programming behind. So, although I am clueless about the distribution of funds in Belgium towards sports or team sports or individual sports, from what you see in the tournaments, it would be easy to assume that there is some sort of effort being spent on men's and women's teams on an equal level. Because the Belgian delegations are always hopeful. They look to succeed in tournaments. I think in under 20, they put one guy in the All Star 5. Um, I think it's yeah, this could be. I guess this could a country like this could be a benchmark for the Western European countries. Of course, then you can talk about the bigger Western European countries, but I would rather keep them out of the equation because France and Germany are probably way too big to be compared to the other ones. Also, it begins at a local level because when you look at the clubs now in Turkey, you're talking about major sponsors focusing on the development of the youth rather than the federation focusing on this. It was like this when I was a kid. I don't know how it works exactly at this moment. But okay, you have to give the federation something, or the federation has to work on developing such a program to be able to have the tools in the future to work with. And if you don't spend enough effort, and there are many things that goes into the word effort. One of them is obviously finance. The other one is will. The other one is careful planning, cost cutting where it's necessary, but also the costs that you have cut has to go to the right places. So if the federation is able to say, "Oh, my men's teams are not as good as my women's teams," then I should probably do something about that and kind of divide the effort in between the two equally if they can. But also now with the 3x3 coming up, also it is easier for now we're talking about division between two genders, but now we also have to talk about division between four different things, which is 3x3 men, 3x3 women, 5-on-5 men, and 5-on-5 women. So yeah, this could I can see this kind of creating a problematic discussion within the basketball world in some communities or some countries. But okay, I guess there should be more guidance through the IOC about how to perhaps carefully plan and organize the funds for every sport.
Under the surface, it's still the idea that we will organize the Olympics, or hopefully are hoping to organize the Olympics in not too long term, and that might make a big difference, like it did in Great Britain, for instance.
I had many talks with the IOC, especially throughout 2016, because I was in Lausanne doing my master's degree in Lausanne, where the IOC is based in. Now, IOC actually has a full committee and a department on the legacy of the games. Once you're talking about the Olympic legacy, it is it is a bit of a gray area because there's no proof, or actually there is proof that's exactly the opposite way, that Olympics having the Olympics in your own country increases participation towards sport. It did for a year or so in London. Yes, this is correct. But also, I would say Great Britain massively struggled with focusing on team sports following the Olympics, because what a lot of people saw was defeats that was unbearable to watch, especially in volleyball, handball. I would even say basketball. And I think there was a planned coast cutting for team sports after that. So, so I would say having the Olympics is an amazing experience. It's fun. It's people come, people see. Uh, you definitely have to do it with a mindset that I I would rather break even that than making money out of the Olympics. But from a legacy standpoint, there's no there's no solid evidence that it gives a legacy of sport to the people. Yeah, the participation probably increases for a little while, but I wouldn't say that keeps up, or at least it has not until now. I went to my first basketball practice when I was 3, when I couldn't even properly run, and I think I was with kids that were 7, 8 years old, and the coach was apparently making me run on his shoulders and like throwing me balls every once in a while. So that was the beginning of everything, and then since then I have not stopped playing basketball. Uh, I think when I was 12, I went to my first proper club team, uh, and I spent there a couple of years. Then I moved to a bigger club. I played for of course, at the youth level, I played for uh, FS for 2 years, Anadolu FS as it's called now. And then, well, basketball kept me going until 10th grade. And in 10th grade, I went to the States for a year and I played in the high school team, in a high school team in Massachusetts. I played there for a year. Uh, and then I spent my 11th grade. I came to Austria, back to Europe to play for a second division team in Austria, which was the Salzburg team. And then I went back to the States that summer to have a couple of tryouts, and eventually I had been offered some scholarships. The biggest one was UConn. I was within the last 10 high school players that they had offered a final tryout for the scholarship kids. I don't think the system works the same now, but and then I decided to come back to Europe because that was a suggestion of a couple of mentors that I had because of my size. Am I quick enough? Am I fast enough to stay there and potentially chase a pro career? One thing was for certain, I was never going to be tall enough, and I guess that was my cue to try to play in lower divisions in Europe, sort of kind of balance everything. And then I played in the UK for 2 years, Newcastle, and then I eventually ended up in France, and I played 4 years in France. Eventually, decided to do my masters and stop playing professional basketball. And I still had the itch, so I played second division in Switzerland while I was doing my masters. And then, yeah, and then I finally, I was working with the headquarters for a project for my master's degree, for a research project. And then I guess when I saw the job opening in FIBA Europe, I think kind of that was, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I should be able to at least, have a final interview with them. And then I eventually ended up at the job. So that's how I came to FIBA. So basketball, basketball, basketball. Now still basketball, I guess.
Let's focus a little bit on development of basketball players in the youth. What is your view on that?
With my own experience as a player and a coach, as a youth player and a youth coach, I would say it's really important to get the timing of teaching the fundamentals right. Because once you, let's say from the age of 12 to 16, in France, for example, it's okay for the kids to have one or two players that are kind of like stars in their team. And until 16, this is kind of accepted normally because until 16, even if you face a major club's youth team, okay, there's a difference, but there's not that big of a difference between the two teams because that's sort of the system that everybody follows. But also in Turkey, once the player has hit the age of 16, then there's a differentiation of leagues. So, for example, in Turkey, once you hit 16, if you're not playing for one of the major clubs' youth teams, then you know that you're probably not going to make it, and you're probably guided in a way by your club that school is just as important as basketball, and basketball becomes more of a recreational thing, although it's still competitive that you represent a club. But I think it's important. I think most important part is the most important part that made me love basketball was how fun it was until then. How fun it was until 16. We used to go to the events. Actually, we are just talking about. You said it's important to have not to have the demand of professional referees or licensed referees or licensed table officials at a very young age, or let's say even at under 16 and under 18 level. Um, this could depend on the country and how the social attitudes towards sports is. I don't think this would be possible, for example, in my country to have a neutral referee, or in Serbia, I don't think it will be possible to have such a system. But yeah, I think it's important, especially from the age of 12 to 16, the kids learn how to play basketball in the right way, but also this way has to be a fun way. So once you have coaches and staff who are probably doing everything voluntarily at this age, for this age group, you, as a federation or as a basketball community, you should not put any additional strain from competition standpoint on these people, because these people are already doing most of the things that they're doing voluntarily for the love of the game, for the love of the children, to do something in the future. And I think it's very important that federations do support this basketball activity at this age is more fun rather than competitive. And we get the message across as the basketball community to our young participants that they should love being here. And once they go home or once they go to school, at the age of 12, 13, we want them to say, hey, I love playing basketball. Why don't you try basketball for once instead of going to football practice tomorrow? This is what we want to create, the internal dialogue between the kids as well. Because you never know what the kids talk between each other at school. Although you have maybe 10 kids at the basketball practice, but tomorrow you might have 12 because one of your players might be one of the cool kids of the school, and he might say to 2 of his friends, hey, look guys, this is really cool. Like, you got to try it, you got to give it a shot. And this is, I guess, how it works. I remember from my elementary school, 3 of my friends joined my first club, and they were football maniacs, to say the least. And now, if I'm correct, one of them doesn't do any sports or sports related stuff, but one of them is now working for EA Games, I believe, and he has a website, not a website, but like a Facebook page in Turkish about NBA. So this is what we want. I mean, even if they don't play basketball, he's the same age as me, so 27. So he's still doing something about basketball that's fun for him. Maybe it also brings a very little amount of income, but he's doing it for fun mainly, I believe, and for the love of the game. So this is what we want kids to create between themselves, rather than us being like, "Oh, basketball is a great sport. You must come and do." But if he influences this one kid to tell to the others how basketball is fun, also it is important when you go to a game or when you go to an event. Let's say, because in some countries you cannot really have the budget for doing like, oh, you play a game every week in one city, you go to the other city. This is also very costly for some of the clubs, especially some of the smaller clubs. So sometimes it's better to create a weekend event at one city or for the regional clubs, and then people go and everybody's having fun. The volunteer girl is also refereeing because she has some sort of sport knowledge, or you have some of the other coaches who don't have games at the moment refereeing the game because their basketball knowledge is good. This is the sort of environment that we should create for the, not the young adults, but one level below. And then once the age comes where you understand if somebody has the right fundamentals, right development, right mindset to play in a team, yes, then there should be a focus on these people playing in similar teams and versus each other, so that they also do the right things within themselves and they also learn how to defend the right things or how to observe other teams. This is also very important. So not to take anything from the competitive aspect of basketball, but it is important to make it fun by all means for everybody, because if it's not fun, nobody participates. Once you have nobody participating, there's no point of doing anything really. So I guess the recreational aspect has to be focused on, not only by us basketball people, but also by the federations who are planning, in some cases, planning, quote unquote planning, but planning and directing their clubs, their regional offices to create events, etc. They should be emphasizing the importance of the fun part, you know. So this is my view about youth basketball. Yeah, you're always going to have talent. I believe that talent exists. I believe that this talent is built around in a fun environment. Once you have this talent come out of that environment, the other people who do not come out of this environment as basketball players will still love basketball, will still make their kids play basketball, will still tell their friends who have not played basketball to send their kids to a basketball school or a basketball club. So it's a chain reaction. We have to create that chain reaction as basketball people or sports people for every sport. And we have to focus less perhaps on marketing the cooler side of being a superstar and more so promoting the cooler aspect of being a team and perhaps sacrificing within that team to make the others become superstars, but you're still a player, you're still there. You're a very important part of that team. And we should also get this message across to our kids because it's not what we're exposed to, let's say, especially by the bigger brands, etc. So I believe that strictly from competition standpoint, that this is how it should be. But after the age of 16, somebody from the marketing department will come and say, no, we cannot do that anymore. I also understand that, and I also think that this is a necessary evil to bring the sport forward at a competitive level.
If you, in a few words, had to explain what FIBA is to basketball lovers, players, board members in the Netherlands, how would you explain it?
Every sports organization is going to be seen as a political organization at some point. I think that's hard to get away from because usually also most of the political people are involved in sports. I think this is the main reason for sports federations being seen as political organizations. But for me, as a FIBA employee, the only thing that matters to me if I'm having a regular day at the office, the only thing that matters to me is regardless of the number of emails that I get, I try to make sure that no one gets a negative response, or that negative response is within the limits that we have, within the regulations that we have. I took up this job for the sole purpose of trying to do something better for basketball. And of course, some decisions are out of our reach as FIBA employees, and we don't usually get involved with the so-called political part. We do have to follow decisions, and we do have to do certain things that are within the regulations, whether we agree or not. But this is the way. I don't think this only applies for the sporting organizations. This applies to many organizations in many different industries, many different markets. For me, the most important thing that people have to realize is that FIBA is a non-profit organization, like all the other international governing bodies of sport. So what this means by law, in most cases, you're not even allowed to make money. Or you make the money, but you're not allowed to keep money. So you do have to distribute this money for the well-being of the sport, for developing the sport. Yeah, some people might not agree with the distribution of money, but of course, this is completely my own opinion. This has nothing to do with FIBA. But for me, for example, if Netherlands is struggling with men's basketball teams, the way I would see it, I would say Netherlands is rich enough. I can only give some guidance. I won't be distributing you as much funds as I distribute to Rwanda to build a basketball court because they only have 3 in their country. From top to bottom, the only goal of the FIBA employees, staff, presidents, board members is to make basketball more lovable. Yes, some decisions may be bad decisions. This is how it is. I mean, this is not. This applies for my relationship as well, just as much as it does for basketball. So I think it's easy to find a scapegoat, but it's also important to understand that there is a mission or a vision behind what we are doing. And as FIBA, the International Basketball Federation, that vision can only be to make basketball better.
Are there ways of support FIBA offers that people are maybe not aware of? things that have nothing to do with big events like this, but by just building a bigger base on basketball or develop people's skills.
I don't believe we have specific programs to say that, oh, if you do this, but if, let's say, if my phone rings and somebody asks me for such an assistance, not from me, but as FIBA, we bring this up, and I don't think it goes unnoticed and it doesn't go unreplied. This is the most important part, and within our power, we do the most we can. One thing that FIBA cannot do is interfere with how the national funds are distributed. There will always be support, and probably there will be also meetings, etc. involved. I don't think if a federation puts through such a request, I don't think this can be ignored in any way. But also, it is the job of the federation to also pass down knowledge to its clubs and to its own members, whom are not necessarily FIBA members or have nothing to do with FIBA. So it's important to understand that there's a structure to things, and although FIBA is a big organization, it's not. We don't have 1,000 employees. I would say between 150 and 200. In our region, we have an events department. We have the competition department, eligibility department, obviously. We have an anti-doping and development department. And we have commissions as well. So we have a youth commission that makes decisions upon the youth. They work out throughout the year, and usually federation members make up these commissions, and they'll bring suggestions. For my office, I can say that we work in tandem with every department to put decisions that were taken into place. And where we need to interfere or make suggestions, we do.